Hello, hello.
Good evening.
How is everybody?
Good.
All righty. Let me stretch this thing back out here. Well, how's everybody's week been so far? Been all right?
Been very busy.
Been very busy.
Yeah, I had one testing meeting yesterday for 3 different tests, and then today had to go back for the accommodations meeting. It's been a lot.
Yeah. Well, it seems like all we do in the school business anymore is meet anyway, so that's become the norm. Dr. Barnes, how are you?
Pretty good. No
Audrey
complaints.
said it's stressful. That's the nature of the beast, though. That's the way the business is. It's stressful.
It's been pretty quiet this week, so I'm thankful.
Well, that's good. I had class over the weekend with my EDCI group, and we're covering. Hey, Dr. Sumner, we're covering 21 Laws of Leadership, Maxwell. And I was telling, and we were talking about the law of momentum. And what people don't understand is now Dr. Laws and I, we team teach this one. And he teaches the first weekend. We both teach the second, and I teach the third when we do the law. The second weekend is the Maxwell weekend, where we do a crash course in leadership for these EDCI doctoral students, or some of them already have their doctorate. They're all but dissertation. But we're talking about the law of momentum, that once it starts going, the law of momentum is when you get things going well, they keep going well, and you tend to build on that. But I always do Dr. Laws does the positive side of the 21 laws. I do the negative side of the 21 laws. When they start going bad, they continue to go bad. And I said, we're sitting there at I-77 and Airwood Road there. And I said, when I was principal right over there, or when I was in the central office, I said, I hate to tell you this, but I'd be praying for a car wreck or maybe a minor shooting on the west side so we could get off the news cycle, because the momentum spirals down. I mean, momentum can carry you up, but it can carry you down too. And so you always have to remember that in the school business, that once it starts going bad, this notion that, well, it's got to get better. No, it don't. It don't have to get better. You have to make it get better. You have to take action to make it get better. And so I always ask people how it's going. I mean, if it's not going good, that's your job to make it go better. That's the whole notion here.
I have a fiscal question.
Yes.
I was talking to my principal yesterday, and don't you think that it's the personality and the savviness on how you lobby for money, that it's that individual who can procure money for that school? Everybody can't have the same personality. So
we talked about that over the weekend with our EDCI doctoral students. We do weekend classes with them because we're doing them a crash course, and we meet during the week and on weekends. And that's one of the things that we talked about is your ability to be able to lobby your school. We're talking about the power, well, some of the laws, but we were talking about you've got to have the ability to network and to collaborate, that your ability to market your school. Dr. Stone, he did a section last night in 601 on marketing your school. That's a big part of being able to develop resources for your school. But the downside of that is everybody doesn't have that personality. Some people aren't able to get out and market and do things that are, that would bring positive light to their school. But yes, a big part of securing resources is the power of personality. That's one of Maxwell's laws. Is the law of legacy. That you're creating a legacy at your school, something that people want to be a part of. And momentum factors into that. When things are going good, positive information, positive spin, it takes that kind of person. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not real big into iconography. All these, awards and plaques and pictures and doing all that marketing type stuff. See, I believe in service after the sale, that you got to deliver. That, I learned a long, long time ago when I was in my first master's program. I had a professor in organizational leadership. The worst thing that you can do is try to get on center stage if you don't have a center stage act. You promote something that's not there and people buy into it and they show up and it's non-existent. That's not a good thing. And part of the problem with trying to market your school is that you better be doing good things, and you better be doing things well, because you have to involve your stakeholders. And when you have people in your building and they see things that don't run well and don't look good, it doesn't go well for you. I'll give you an example. Gardner-Webb, they have a lot of events and a lot of activities for prospective students and their parents. And let's see, 2015 and 16, those 2 years I was across campus. My office was in Lindsay. And I liked it because it was right next to the lunchroom, which I have to walk all the way across campus to get to the lunchroom now. Not my favorite place, but that's okay. But I was up in Lindsay for 2 years, and right outside my office was the parking area in front of the campus center, where they have the visitor parking signs, and they put the name of the students up on the signs when their parents come in, and they would have these students meet them there. And they had the golf cart and drive them around, and this was their launching area. And I came out one day to go to lunch, and I was watching what was going on. These parents, and somebody had kicked over a trash can. There's trash just scattered everywhere. And the students that were there to lead these tours just walked right past the trash. And I saw these parents sitting there thinking, they can't even do the simple things like pick the trash up off the, it's just everywhere out here on the sidewalk. That was a really bad look. Now, my argument is not, the students wouldn't know that, but see, there should have been an adult there. And that's part of my argument, or the bigger argument is, when you have these people to show up at your school, they want to meet an adult. They don't and talk with an adult. They just have these students who couldn't answer any questions, didn't understand it, and that's a bad look. And so we spend all this time and money and effort marketing, but then when people get there, we don't have a center stage act. We don't have our act together. We don't have the adults are sitting back there in the building in their offices, don't want to be bothered. Well, this is what you do if you're in admissions. You don't just send a bunch of student government volunteers out there. I know that's kind of a trivial thing, but it starts with something that small and goes all the way through. But marketing, promoting, a lot of it is power of personality, but you got to have the right personalities. The kids are not the right people. They want to see somebody in charge. They want to be greeted by an adult. They want somebody, for the kind of money we're charging, they expect more than some kid volunteer. Now, my very next door neighbor, right behind me here, right behind 2 walls over behind me, he took his son 2 years ago, who was a prospective baseball player. He took them, and he said every question he asked that the student didn't know the answer to. He asked about, what's your rank on undergraduate? What percentage of your students get jobs? What percentage of your students get in graduate school? All the things that a parent would be interested in that's paying this kind of money. Students didn't know any of that. Boy, they would answer with things like, well, the buffet and the cafeteria is all you can eat. And, we have a really nice homecoming dance. And the parent had questions. Now, he said, my son really didn't care much for the place anyway, but he said, if we had been serious buyers, he said, that would have turned us off. And so you got to understand, you only get one chance to make a first impression. You have to deliver on the goods. You have to deliver on your promises, iconography, putting up posters and banners and smiley faces. There's got to be some substance behind it. So I said all that to say this. You can only market your school if your school is good. You're producing good test scores. You're making a good number go up, which is test scores. You're making a bad number go down, which is disciplinary incidents, suspensions, and those kinds of things. And until you get that under control, you're doing yourself a disservice to try to market your school, because people will see through that. But then once you get things going well, then you've got to have the power of personality to garner those stakeholders, community members, businesses to do resource development. They're not going to give you money for a school that's broken and not working. They may not give it to you anyway, but they're definitely not going to if you don't have your house in order. They're not going to give you money. But you're exactly right. A lot of it is power of personality, power of persuasion. But you've got to have something. You've got to have a foundation a base for that power, and that's what this course is actually about. Is being able to build a base for that power, to build a well-functioning, well-running school that everybody can be proud of, that parents feel safe to send their kids there, employees feel safe to work there. That's the whole notion here, is that we have to, these places, it doesn't happen because you want it to. You have to work to make it that way. And that's the notion of what this course is all about. Is making our schools safe and functional, running them well financially, having a good master schedule, a good school improvement plan, running the school well and from a management perspective, so that we then can multiply on top of that. We can market that. We can show that to consumers. And it's not just raising money, it's also market share for students. There's a lot of alternatives now to public education. Privates, charters, Christian schools. I met with a charter school executive 2 weeks ago looking to be able to present a program for those people in terms of they want masters in administration but can't get them because they don't have a certified administrator on their campuses. We're going to try to work through that issue. That's a growing part of the population. But every one of those students that leaves a charter school, that's another customer that we lose. You've got to have the kind of place that people want to come to, not want to leave. And that's a lot of what this course is about. So that's a great point, William. That point is well received. That's an astute point. All right, I'm going to go to my screen share, and we'll get started for the evening. As always, we start with our weekly schedule. This is week 7, October the 9th. You should be through with your OMA Task 2. For those of you who aren't, please remember it's Tasks 1, 2, and 3 of the APTEL, APTEL. And if you did not, when you wrote your APTEL, if you did not summarize your professional growth plan, use the standard graphic organizer that you use, but make sure you summarize that growth plan, because that's what that task calls for, is a graphic of a growth plan. Make sure you remember those directions. That's what they want to see. Let me go back to those directions for you. Let's see if I can find that. I had it pulled up. Which way did it go? Here it is right there. I'm sorry. So when you do that, it says program for instructional capacity, and all those things that have to be in it, but it's supposed to be in a graphic organizer, charts, graph, or tables. It needs to be in a document. It needs to be summarized. in that professional growth plan. So, and make sure that it's in the body of your paper. Don't put it as an appendices. Don't put it after your references, because when you build your paper, task 3 is going to come after it. Your professional growth plan won't be right after the narrative. It'll be after task 4 down at the bottom of the paper, and it'd be hard for the grader to find it. So make sure the graphic organizer comes at the end of task 2, right before you go to your references. Make sure that's where you put your graphic organizer, so it will stay in place with the narrative that describes it when you move your references down and your appendices down, when you add task 3 and task 4 into your paper. And also, another thing, please remember, we've got a template in there, the OMA template. Make sure you put the task directions and prompts in your paper to remind the evaluator what they're reading. Now, I know because I do it every day, but it makes it much easier for them to grade. When they grade in TaskStream, they pop your paper up on the screen splits. Half of it's got your paper, the other half has the grading rubric, and it's put in task and prompts just like it's given to you. And if you don't have task and prompts in your paper, they have to scroll back and forth in your paper trying to find that stuff that they're looking for on that grading rubric. Don't make them do that. They don't like that. They don't give you the benefit of the doubt. That's why you get a 3.4 rather than a 4.0, is they have to hunt stuff, and it's not in order, and it's not where they expect it to be. If you have the headings, it's going to be where it's supposed to be. And even if it didn't match that, it would still be right there where they could find it. Oh, this is what I'm looking for. So if we go back and look at that, on the template, you'll notice the template has your name here. It has your cover page for you, and it has all of the description, the instructions, and the prompt. And then after the prompt, this right here is where you start with your, you start here, and then you have textual. You label all these things. These bullets are your headings. Make sure that you drop it in there. Make sure that they know what you're telling them and that you're following the rubric. Again, they're going to pop it up and they're going to compare. They're going to take, when their screen splits, let me pull it up for you. I have to move some of this stuff out of the way. So when they start grading it, on one side will be your paper. On the other side is this rubric right here. And see how it has the section headings? They're looking to start with for your analysis of school context. And then they're looking for the contextual analysis, and it tells them what they should be looking for. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to pop it up on half the screen, and this is going to be on half the screen. And they're going to start reading the accomplished column, comparing it to your paper. If they don't see everything, they're going to move over to the proficient column. If they don't see everything, they're going to move over to the developing column. That's the way they grade these papers. It tells them exactly what they're going to be looking for. It has the bullets. Tells them exactly what you should have. You have this. It's in the task and prompts. There is no reason why you shouldn't have these things in your papers but you've got to tell them what they're looking for. They're looking for these headings. So if you just start writing and don't tell them you just went from prompt 1 to prompt 2, and this is what you're doing in prompt 2, or you went from task 1 to task 2, they have to kind of roll back and forth in your paper and kind of figure it out. They don't like that. That's how good papers get 3.1 and 3.2 rather than 3.8, 3.9, 4.0. It'll cost you at least a half a point if you don't have the directions in there. I mean, they're just human. They get paid to do each one of these. They get paid a set amount, whether it takes them 20 minutes or whether it takes them an hour. They get paid a set amount to grade these things, and they're only human. And if you make it take an hour when it shouldn't have taken but 20 minutes, they tend to nitpick you and take points off. That's just the way it works. I just have to tell you the truth of the matter. And so some of these that y'all have been turning in, make sure that when you get them ready in the end, make sure these directions, the task and the prompts and the directions are on there. You'll do much better on the grades. If that, that's important, how well you do on these. Again, I'm seeing some task 3s come in. Let me catch this question. It came in on the chat here. Oh, I said I would. It went away. All right. So make sure I'm seeing it says and we'll develop an analysis of the existing school schedule. Make sure that you don't forget the very first one. Assessment of the current school scheduling procedures, strengths and areas for improvement. Not just to the schedule, but of the procedures that built the schedule. I told you that last week. I'm going to remind you again. They want to see a section that speaks to current scheduling procedures. Did you start with federal law? Then go to state law, local policy, best practices, EVOS, teacher input. Did you go that way? Analyze the procedure that led to it, or did you just all get together in a room and look at last year's schedule? Make sure you understand. They want to know, do you know the process, and have you assessed that process that led to that schedule? Make sure that you don't forget that first bullet right there. If you make that a column, if you make that a heading in your paper, then you will address it. All these bullets should be section headings in your paper, where you've addressed these things, because that's what they're going to be looking for. You might have written something about it in it, but you didn't label it. They're not going to give you credit for it. So every one of these bullets under prompt 1 should be the section of a heading, the heading of a section where you've addressed that in narrative form. Make sure you do that. All right. Anybody have any questions on task 3? I covered it last week. You should be good to go, and that's where you should be. You should be starting task 3 this week. Some of you are already there, but all of you need to be catching up. You need to be getting to task 3. All right. Let me get that out of the way and that out of the way. All right. So this week, we're looking at cyberbullying this week. Cyberbullying, we're going to do a little more with sexual harassment. I want to get into that as well, because unfortunately, many times the two are linked. And so I want to get into those policies tonight. All right. So we know that our disciplinary data reporting manual, that's our manual, and there it is, and it covers this. I had it and then I moved off of it, but I'm coming back. The School Violence Prevention Act, passed in 2009, defines bullying as any pattern of gestures or written, electronic, verbal communication, physical act, or threatening communication takes place on school property, school-sponsored function, or on a school bus that places a student at reasonable fear of harm to his or her person, damage to his or her property, hostile environment, which can interfere with or impair a student's educational performance, opportunities, or benefits. Series of deliberate or hurtful actions inflicted by one or more students. Bullying may be physical, verbal, social, relational, or sexual harassment is a form of bullying. All right. Cyberbullying is a criminal offense punishable by a misdemeanor. For definitions, we'll go to NC Statute 458.1. Bullying or cyberbullying should be reported in as a disciplinary act in disciplinary data in Power School. And since cyberbullying is actual crime, you need to involve law enforcement. So let's go to the law. So this is North Carolina General Statute 14458.1. And here are the things that you're not allowed to do. A person, it shall be unlawful for any person to use a computer or computer network to do any of the following: build a fake profile or website, pose as a minor in an internet chat room, electronic mail, or an IM, instant message, follow a minor online or into an internet chat room, post or encourage others to post on the internet private, personal, or sexual information pertaining to a minor. Understanding all the people we deal with, except for some high school seniors, they're all minors. That's why it's against the law. That's why you need to, every one of you that has responded to the discussion board post, I remind you, you've got to involve law enforcement. And here it goes into great detail of the things that you cannot do. It's a class 1 misdemeanor or worse. Now, for some reason, and I do not know why, folks think that this law no longer applies. And I told you, and I'll tell you again, the only thing that's been taken out of this is if you're involved in a Twitter war and it gets too rough for you, you can't claim that you've been cyberbullied if you were a willing participant in the Twitter war or the IM, the messaging war, or on the internet through email or whatever. As long as you're not guilty of that, being in the back and forth, the law is still in place. And for some reason, we also have this notion that we don't know if it happened here at school. That's immaterial. If it's a student in your school, then you have to take action. Well, I don't know if they used a school computer. Again, immaterial. This notion that we don't know where it happened, or we don't know if they used school or they sent it during the school day. None of that is in this law. None of that matters. If somebody is cyberbullying a kid in your building and it's somebody else in your building, then you're responsible to take action for that, period. No excuses. Don't cop out. This is what we're talking about. You know, clean up your act, clean up your house. Especially with all the kids that are harming themselves now. As I told you last week, Marie Osmond now claims that her son that killed himself, that the problem was cyberbullying, that he was bullied. And she's blaming that now. And I feel for her losing a child. And I'm not making light. I'm just telling you she's come to that conclusion in her life. It may or may not have been a factor. I don't know. But we're getting more and more of that now as children self-harm, cut, take drugs, self-medicate, prescription, alcohol. A lot of it comes back to their rationale is I've been bullied or cyberbullied, and nobody did anything about it. And so that's why I'm telling you, this is the crime of the future. People don't engage much anymore personally. They do everything on their phone or their tablet or on their laptop. People don't do much face-to-face bullying anymore. It's all done online. This is the crime of the future. right here, and that's why I pulled it out separately. This is the one that you're going to be dealing with the most in terms of any of these kinds of behaviors is cyberbullying. I've told you the story at the high school locally here to where I live. Boy at the high school was having middle school girls send him picture, and then he was blackmailing them with the pictures to have sex with him and them underage 11, 12, 13-year-old girls and him 18. Thankfully, the assistant principal didn't say it was somebody else's problem and turned it over to law enforcement, and they were able to stop a pedophile, a sexual predator. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about here. It's not just limited to, I mean, there was an element of cyberbullying. He was bullying them to have sex with him and threatening and blackmailing them. It won't always be at that level, but there's a lot of these kinds of things that go on. You've got to be involved in that. When you get reports of this, first thing I'd do is I'd get in touch with my school resource officer and say, I've had this report, especially if there's any element of sexual misadventure involved in it, you need to involve the police. But here is the cyberbullying law. It's referenced in the manual. You can pull it up yourself and read it. Again, it's referenced in our manual along with bullying, how to involve it. Please remember that sometimes this stuff turns physical, and you need to remember the rules on those. They're here in the back, and these are persistently dangerous acts of violence. That a lot of this bullying and cyberbullying lead to these kinds of things: sexual assault, sexual offense, statutory rape. That's what happened with the fellow at the high school, taking indecent liberties with the minor. These are the kinds of things that much of this sexually oriented cyberbullying, this is the culmination of it. This is where it's headed. We talk about antecedent behaviors. Cyberbullying leads to sexual offenses, violent offenses on your campus, or that you're responsible for. If you want to stop these things, you've got to stop cyberbullying, because that's the antecedent to these sexual infractions. If you'll remember the right here, gang activity, that's where you get your drugs and weapons. Sexting, sexual harassment, cyberbullying, that's where you get your sexual crimes. Remember, these crimes, these persistently dangerous crimes, the acts of violence are all either sexual or violence, assault, weapons, drug-related kinds of things, and that's all kind of rolled into one. They kind of fit into two categories, and we know what the antecedents are. If you let gang activity happen on your campus, you're going to have drugs, and you're going to have violence, and you're going to have weapons. If you allow cyberbullying, sexting, sexual harassment, inappropriate touching, if you allow those kinds of things to happen on your campus, you will end up with those four types of sexual felonies happening on your campus as well, acts of violence. So if we can categorize them into two categories. The gang activity, now, it doesn't have to be a gang, but it's gang type behavior. But those are what lead us to these infractions. Again, I've got this presentation that I did a few years back, and it has all the federal guidelines. It speaks to No Child Left Behind. It talks about persistently dangerous. We talked about that. Here are our acts of violence. And as you can see, sexual offense, rape, sexual assault, generally indecent liberties, and kidnapping, those generally all go with bullying, cyberbullying, sexting, sexual harassment. Those are those. Gang type behavior or violent behavior that's gang in nature generally leads to homicides, assault with bodily injuries, weapons, those kinds of things. It also, you get the kicker of drugs coming along with a lot of gangs as well. or gang type activity. So you can kind of categorize them in two areas. And so those are the things that you have to stop. If you want to stop the bad sexual stuff before it happens on your campus, the key is cyberbullying, sexting, texting, those kinds of things, harassment that takes place. Obviously, to stop what happens, victim and perp crime one-on-one, but the majority of it now is not one-on-one initially. It starts out cyber, it starts out on the net to begin with. That's the place to stop it before it gets spread throughout your building. And so I have this presentation and you can work through it. I'm not going to take all your time tonight on it. And it has all the rules and the laws. We've got traditional types of gangs. You say, well, we don't have gangs in our school. It's not just traditional gangs. It's it's gang type behaviors. They don't have to be wearing gang paraphernalia. But when we talk about gang behavior, we're talking about illegal behavior that usually there's some kind of criminality around it. They're selling drugs. They're committing small petty crimes, those kinds of things. But it's the violent stuff, the face-to-face, the assaults, the jumping, all those kinds of things. That's the kind of stuff that leads to the serious violent crimes. And so this is a good primer on gangs and gang behavior. But I want you to understand it's not just, we don't have the Crips and the Bloods, we're fine. It's gang type behavior, even if it isn't an official gang, that leads you to that, where you have cliques of kids that fight or assault other cliques of kids, or that kind of thing. So if you want to call them cliques or groups or whatever you want to call them, but it's still gang-like behavior. Sexual harassment, identification, and prevention. I have all the federal statute here, starting with Title IX. That goes through all of our state statutes that prevent this from happening. And it kind of gives you a primer on all the different laws, and it gives you the highlights of each one of those. This is still, and it explains what sexual harassment is, who can carry it out. It describes it. Again, touching of a sexual, all these things. It tells you what harassment is. It can start online as cyber, and then then it moves to the physical. That's the thing that you have to understand about it. All these things, they don't usually start out at the most highest level. They start and they build, and that's the rule of antecedent behavior. The little stuff becomes the big stuff. So you've got to be looking for these kinds of things, outward signs, physically and also online when you get those reports. It gives other examples, tells about sexting. It gives definitions of that, and it asks some questions, gives you some scenarios. Criminal versus non-criminal in nature. But again, you are not qualified to do sexual investigation. So especially if there's any report of sexual misconduct in the report that comes to you, you need to involve law enforcement. And we go through all these things. We had another case this week. I'm going to stop my share here for a minute. We had another case this week in a neighboring county here to Mecklenburg, over in Gaston. An assistant principal was arrested over the weekend. The superintendent over there is pretty popular. He has a pretty good working relationship with the police department. So they waited till Friday night late to arrest her. She was assistant principal at their flagship high school, actually in where he lives in the county, the most affluent area. The assistant principal there, she was arrested and with $1 million bond on Friday night, so it wouldn't be on the news cycle, and it wouldn't be they were playing their biggest football game of the year against their rival, so it wouldn't be out. They waited until that, and they went and got her in the middle of the night. Now, most people wouldn't be that lucky. They arrested her for having sex multiple times with underage students. I don't know how many. I've tried to stay out of it. I don't know how many times. I don't know how many students. But obviously, it's pretty much a dead bang case. $1 million bond. She was the star assistant principal in the district. Was already going to be a principal next year. And the question comes back: how'd you not know that? Well, I don't know. We don't know what danger or terror or perversion lies in the heart of men or women. We can't know that. But, we were discussing this case over the weekend, and Dr. Laws and I, and he's the mentor for that superintendent. I mean, he truly is he's his, the state gives superintendents mentors when they're young. He was his. And I worked with him in CMS, and the superintendent is a smart and good person, and the principal is a seasoned principal, obviously there at the flagship high school. But the question remains: how'd this happen? This has been going on for quite a while. And so we've got a chat going on the side here. And so the question is, what did you know and when did you know it? Now, Dr. Laws, he's a lot smarter than I am. He's LS. He thinks that the principal will be fine. That she's been there for a long time. She's got her time in, and people like her, and that she'll have a rough day or two this week, but he thinks she'll be fine. I don't gamble because I understand probability, but that wouldn't be my bet. My bet will be is at the end of this year she will be, because of her status and because she is a quality person. If I were betting, I'd bet that she retires at the end of this year, or by the end of the year, that she'll be retired. I don't know that they can get off the news cycle. I really don't. I don't know that they can get off the news cycle on this thing until somebody besides the person involved. And I believe that if she pleads guilty or she's convicted fairly quickly, somebody will have to go. Somebody will have to go, because the question persists: how is it how'd this happen? How'd y'all not know this was happening? There's been rumors about this for months. Kids can't keep a secret. How'd this happen? How'd y'all not know it? Why didn't y'all investigate? What did you know and when did you know it? And even if there's, and I may be being too hard on them, maybe they're as pure as the driven snow. I don't know. But what I do know is if they can't get off the news cycle, if they can't move on from this fairly quickly, if somebody's going to have to go home. Now, if you were a new principal there, you'd already be gone. You'd have been out on Monday. They'd have had an interim principal there on Monday morning if you had been a new principal there in your first 2 or 3 years. They'd have had somebody from the central office running that school on Monday. The only thing that saved the principal there now is that she's been there. She's a 15-year veteran and well respected in the community. But I don't know that that's going to save her. I hope it does. I'm not pulling against her. I hope it does, but I don't know. I'm gonna put both of my colleagues on the spot tonight. I know you don't, and we don't want to know. I'm an old time Baptist. I don't want to know the gory details. But I'm going to start with Dr. Sumner, who's worked in the West. In the districts that you know and you've worked in, or the places that you've been, something like this were to happen, an assistant principal at a high school having sex with students, what are the chances the principal would survive it in the places in the West where you've worked?
In the West, honestly, pretty high. We don't usually have a ton of turnover, and not all of our folks are homegrown, but a lot of them are. Honestly, in recent cases, many of our issues end up dealing more with the principal than the assistant principal, and that may just be kind of luck of the draw. So it turns out differently as a result of that. But in the cases that I know of where it's been an issue with assistant principals, the principal has a long-standing reputation in the 2 or 3 cases that just come to mind, that prevented them really from kind of getting their hands dirty in it. So, but again, I think we're in a different situation here in the West because there's just not as much turnover, and
there's no, outside of Asheville, there's no media.
Right.
There's just not the scrutiny in the far West.
Yeah. So I think it would be different here than otherwise.
Exactly. So now I want to juxtapose that to Charlotte. Dr. Barnes.
So for us, the turnover is quite often, and the principal will probably get the grunt of it, and it would be blamed more so for the principal, and they would more than likely be removed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got all 4 major networks have affiliates in town, plus the local news. So there's 5 TV stations in town. You've got the biggest paper in the Southeast, the Charlotte Observer, outside of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. You've got reporters everywhere on the ground. So,
and for us, the media would blame the principal.
Absolutely. That's what I mean.
The
principal would be the one under scrutiny, not the AP that did it.
Even if the principal didn't know anything about it, they would still be blamed.
How did you hire this person and supervise this person and you didn't know? That is absolutely 100%, because I'm the one that had to do that, so I know. So now the question is this is a bedroom community to Charlotte, the very next county over. They have a branch of the Charlotte Observer in that county. The news media has outposts over there from the major stations.
But you know what? I was just reading, and it's been picked up all over the country.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been picked up all over the country because it's in a major, although it might be in Gaston County, it's in the Charlotte market. They have the Charlotte Observer has a post over there. All the TV stations have studios over there. It's the Charlotte market. It's considered the greater Charlotte area. It might as well have happened in Charlotte. And so it's gone viral. It's gone national. It's not like it happened in one of the far west counties. It's not the deal. This happened in a major media market. I don't see the principal surviving it. Now the principal won't have to go to jail, but I do not see the principal surviving this one. Now, it's going to vary from district to district, but I certainly would not want my career riding on just hoping that we were in an out of the way place enough that this wouldn't get me because of media. And that's what I'm talking about. I kind of set this up tonight with the law of momentum. Once it gets started against you, good and bad, this being bad, as we say in the business, there must be blood. People won't calm down. They won't quit until somebody goes. It's got to be more than just the perpetrators, what I'm telling you. If you let these things happen on your campus and something like this breaks, Yeah, the person who did it will be punished, but they'll be looking for you, the person in charge. Why didn't you know? What did you know? When did you know it? Why didn't you stop this? You got rumor of this. Why didn't you tell the police? Why didn't you start an investigation? Why wasn't you looking into this? Even if it's a student on another student, or God forbid, a teacher or an administrator on a student, or a student on a teacher or an administrator. Why didn't you stop this? If you got wind of this at all, why didn't you stop this? And then the question comes in Charlotte, well, you say you didn't know anything. Why didn't you know anything? What were they paying you to do? You know, what were you doing every day that you wasn't paying attention? They use that against you.
Dr. Lamb, I that did recall, I think this is a timely moment to bring up one incident where the principal did go down and have to have an early retirement when it came out that there was evidence that the principal was aware and chose to do an internal investigation without involving law enforcement. And that was kind of the deal breaker, that, you know, long-standing relationships notwithstanding, it was not.
You do that, I don't care how long you've been there, you're goner. Well, that's what happened at North Meck with the 16-year-old girl that was self-contained DC. They said, well, we'll keep this in-house. And the Huntersville police absolutely threw them under the bus, claimed malfeasance on their part, said, we're sure a crime was committed here, but we can't pursue it because they've contaminated the evidence by conducting their own investigation, which they weren't qualified to do. Oh my. And that was a principal who had come out of the central office, was the most respected and a long-serving principal in the district. That didn't matter. That did not matter. They had chose to try to handle it in-house, you know, to avoid the media scrutiny. Came out, this girl's can't consent. Doesn't matter if she's 16. She's mentally incapacitated. Read the law. And that's in that manual I just showed you. Every one of those sexual crimes says that if this happens to somebody, they may be 16 or older, but if they're mentally incapacitated, if they're in EC self-contained, no consent, that's a crime. Even if they're willing, that doesn't matter. They're not mentally capable of consenting. They have been taken advantage of. If you knew it and you decided to try to do the investigation yourself or whatever, oh no, you won't survive that. You've committed a criminal act. You won't survive that. If you just didn't know and you're in some out of the way place, you might survive it. But if you're in a major media market, you know, William, where do you work? Don't you work in Durham? Yeah, William works in Durham.
Lakeview School.
Mm-hmm. William's in Durham. You think somebody could get away with this in Durham with the media coverage that's in Durham?
No, sir.
No way. Oh, no way. I worked in Wake a long time ago. Oh, no way. Right. We had to ask the media to get out of the way to get in the door, just like in Charlotte. They were there. They were at everything. Especially in times of disrest, civil disrest, a big pupil assignment, a big property tax, a big school bond, those kinds of things, which are always going on in the big districts. Tamara said that their superintendent retired suddenly in August, and the situation surrounding his sudden retirement is messy. The media is all over it. Absolutely. And you have another one here. I won't mention her name. Is talking about principal said she won't deal with it because it happened off campus. No. I mean, that's not going to say, you know, just like the principal saying, well, the teacher had sex with that student, but they weren't here at the building, so it's not our problem. I don't think you're going to get away with that. I know you won't get away with that. The law is clear. If it happened, your students are involved. It's your responsibility. These are the kinds of things, folks. Dr. Law said to me over the weekend, said, you make it sound like this is the worst job in the world. I said, no, it's the best job in the world if you do it properly. But if you get into it for the wrong reasons, and you don't follow up on your responsibility to protect your students and your staff, then you will pay the price, as you should. I am not claiming that anybody is being treated unfairly in this. I don't like the term fair. That's an early adolescent middle school concept. Adults understand life isn't fair. For an adult, fair is where you go in the fall of the year to get a corn dog and ride the Ferris wheel. There is no fair. But I'm not telling you that these people who are losing their jobs have been treated inequitably or unfairly or whatever. What I'm telling you is if you don't do your job, if you don't do the unpopular things, if you don't make it your business, if you pop out and say, well, I don't know where it happened or it didn't happen here, so I don't have to deal with it, it will come back and get you. These kinds of things don't go away in this era. They just don't go away because of social media. And it may be a few years. And that was my point about Marie Osmond. Again, I feel for her losing a child. It's been a few years, but now it's boomeranged back. She's advancing the thesis that her son killed himself because of the bullying. And it's been a while, but I'm sure that there's some people somewhere who are nervous about that. Where's that going to go? Is somebody going to start an investigation? What's going to happen? So even if it doesn't happen today, there's no statute of limitations on some of this stuff. It's going to come back and get you. And if you don't deal with it, parents always have the right to go to any magistrate and file charges. If you don't deal with it, then you're going to deal with it when the police come showing up at your place. My last story of the evening is I was principal and I was, having a reasonable day as I remember, and the intercom buzzed from my secretary and said the Secret Service is here. And I said, what? Yeah, the Secret Service is here. There's a Secret Service, which is the Department of the Treasury, by the way. If you don't know that, I learned the hard way. There's a Secret Service office in Charlotte. And two agents come showing up in my office one day unannounced. They didn't have a bit of sense of humor about them either. They were not smiling. They were not happy to be there. Because they had traced a death threat to the First Lady of the United States back to one of our computers in our computer lab. That was the time before everybody had a phone and had a tablet and had a laptop. And mostly what you had to do back then to get on the internet, you had to go to a library or a school computer lab. And a death threat to the First Lady, Hillary Clinton, had come from our school. When those people get through with you, you'd wish that they hadn't started with you. So my last story of the evening is even though you might think that people aren't looking, people aren't watching, people aren't monitoring, that people don't take things seriously, even if you're unawares, that won't stop it when it starts. And so thankfully for us, we'd had a use policy. We were able to track down the student, and we knew who the computer was logged into and all those kinds of things. We had done our due diligence, and the faculty, the staff were cleared in this case. The student wasn't, but we were cleared in this case. But when those people come through the door, when law enforcement comes, you are as big a suspect as the perpetrator is. And that was kind of the point that we were making, and Dr. Sumner highlighted is they want to know why they're looking for you, not just the perpetrator. They want to know why, if you're in charge here, why weren't you in charge? Why weren't you doing your job? And so this is another one of those things you got to be on top of. Again, it goes back to antecedent behaviors. The little things become the big things. You got to be on top of this stuff. When you hear rumors, I don't care where they came from. When you get reports, you better run them down. This cop out, I don't know where it happened. It didn't happen here. Not my problem. Happened in the community. No. If you let that happen, it will get you. It will end you. And all of you are on the other end of your career. You're not old enough that you can take your retirement and go home. You just have to go home. And there is no lovely parting gift, let me tell you, because you're going to lose your license on the way out the door, and you can't work anyway. So this is not about scaring you. This is about making you understand the stakes that you're playing for. When you get into this profession, that this is the downside. Every profession has a downside. Even a medical doctor has malpractice suit. But this is the downside. My job is to make you aware and to give you hopefully some ideas or some tools or some skills to get around this. But I would be remiss in our obligation to you if I didn't remind you that this is what happens. This is the stakes that we're playing for. This is real. People's lives are at stake here. Their futures, they're all in your hands. You've got to take that responsibility very seriously. Does anybody else have anything for the good of the group tonight? I see my time is up. I guess tonight was mostly just a sermon, but this is the one that I believe that folks are neglecting the most in our business and is causing the most consternation and is harming the most people. And we seem to be oblivious, or we don't want to get involved. We need to, this is a Christian university. We're supposed to be a cut above in terms of our behavior, our morals, our ethics. We need to be better than this. We need to make sure that we maintain our responsibilities. Let me go back to our weekly schedule and look for next week. Next week, we're going to be spending our time in special services. That's EC 504 and some of those others. Also, intervention teams, IEP meeting. Some of you, let me go back and get my share here going. Some of you, there's our share. Some of you have been already going to, the takeaway from your IEP team meeting is that nobody's really in charge. The EC staff runs the meeting, but it's a collaborative process. You need to understand that you can't just come in and do what you want. But I want you to spend some time with your intervention team because, as I've told you before, if something goes wrong in EC, there's some layers between you and that problem as a school administrator. You've got your compliance technician, you've got your EC chair, your assistant superintendent for special services. When things go wrong, there's a buffer. When things go wrong on your school intervention team, that's what the state refers to as a SBC, school-based committee. That means if that goes wrong, principal goes home. You're responsible to make sure that those interventions are in place, that we aren't rushing to judgment and testing kids before we give them their required 90 days of federal law intervention and our 90 days of MTSS, multi-tiered system of support that's now required in North Carolina in all districts. So make sure that you understand why you're doing these, especially the intervention team. How does it function? What assurances do we have that it's going to work and that we're following the process? What checks and balances or procedures, policies are in place to make sure that process is followed thoroughly? And then when we get sued, we don't lose, that we have provided the services that are required, students are required to get. So understand why you're doing discussion board number 8. That committee is yours. You own it. That care team, intervention team, whatever you call it, that you own that as a principal, and you got to make sure that it works correctly. So that's what we're going to be working on next week. Looking forward after that. The next week we have no Zoom session because we're on fall break. And then when we meet again on October 30th, we'll go to case study number 3. I'll outline case study number 3 next week when we do our EC. Anybody have anything else again for the good of the group before we go home tonight? I appreciate your your side chats over here and your participation, everybody being here. If nothing else tonight, I'll see you all next week. Have a good week. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.